I've had the pleasure of spending some time with you this afternoon listening to the presentations, and I have to say I recognise some of the presenters here, and those of you who are involved in listening to those, I hope will feel inspired. What I thought in the selection was the range of opportunities that were presented by the four presenters, each with a different career pathway. And I would invite you in this presentation to keep an open mind for yourselves about that, and to look at and understand the presentations that were going on earlier in that respect. So here we are, and thank you for that warm invitation. A little bit about Vitae. We have four aims. We're funded, currently particularly looking at research staff at the moment, by Research Councils UK, and that's all the funding councils, as well as Higher Education Funding Council for England, Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. So there's a lot of support and a lot of recognition at policy level about the importance of developing researchers, and that's yourselves. So there's our four aims. The one that I really thought I'd focus on today was about empowerment of researchers, yourselves, about taking responsibility for your own career journeys and how you can improve and enhance your opportunities. So my presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about managing your career and the expectations on you from stakeholders, funders, perhaps supervisors, and yourselves. Personal development planning, how important it is for researchers. What successful researchers say about capabilities. And I think the presentation showed a broad range of them this afternoon. And a little bit about career destinations. And I want to look a little bit at the UK and then look broader into the international perspectives as well. So I tend to think that this can get lost. Okay, so Gareth Roberts this was said in 2002, Set for Success was his definitive report, and that kind of then stimulated investment by the research councils and the funders of your degree programmes to look at the development of the researcher as well as the research. Okay, this may not be something that you see and think about in your daily work, but that is the ambition within the funding. So I just want to ask you to stop a little bit, just stop and pause, and have a little reflection about what career means to you. Picture, what does career mean? Why are you here? Where do you want to go? Do you have a career goal in your mind right now? Yeah? Hands up, who's got a career goal? Oh, there we go, about a third maybe of you've got a career goal, so you're just going to go through it, see what happens at the end. Yeah, that's a good approach. Why not? You know, keep the eyes open for things. Do you understand all the available development opportunities within a place like Imperial? Have you ever thought about how you could develop yourself outside of your research lab, your PhD? Do you know what success looks like? How would you judge yourself as being successful in your career? Are you going to take other people's word for it? Are you going to decide yourself that you are successful? How many career options have you explored? Before you took on your PhD, at the end of your first degree, how many people looked at this as their only option? That was it, that's all I'm going to do. Going to come and study a PhD. No? So how many looked at 2 or 3 options? Yeah? 4 or 5 options? 2 or 3 options, that looks about there. The rest of you, how many did you look at? Career options, and you think, oh, what am I going to do next? 2 or 3, there we go. We'll go on that. So that's interesting. This is the one that you've chosen. Generally speaking, these are huge assumptions, and you can decide you're not on this list. Okay, this doesn't fit me. But these are the sort of general things about researchers. Very few use career services, and yet they'll be excellent here, I know. Can feel a bit helpless in career planning in the midst of all these super researchers and the university, what am I doing? I don't know. Perhaps reluctant to look at your own careers. A lack of obvious alternatives and role models. And I thought what was interesting from Ben's video, which will be available, was how he took the opportunity of an internship to discover other role models and different options for himself. So that goes with limited experience out of HE, maybe, yes, no. PIs and supervisors, dare I say this, may not always be best placed to give you careers advice. They might give you fantastic advice about your PhD and your research and your publications and wow, and that's why you're there. And it's always fantastic how our researchers always name the person that they're working with, right? Every one of the presentations today mentioned the person they were working with because that is important. That is seen as important. But that may not be your career. That's their career. What about them supporting your career? The transferabilities of capabilities is not always understood. And it was interesting. There was just a little trail in Ben's video when he said he was working in policy as an internship. And he said, I used a lot of the skills I used in the lab. And I began to think, what skills were those in the lab that he would use interviewing researchers about international research policy? That's something to ask him about what he meant by that. You'll either be sitting thinking, I'm the one. I will be the one with the great discovery. I am the one. I will be the postdoc. I will be the professor within 10 years. I am the one. Or you might be thinking, I am not the one. Oh dear, I feel I'm sinking here. This is not for me. And these are things that are kind of unconscious decisions that you make. And be aware that how you see challenges will be dependent on how you feel about yourself, your self-esteem, and where you want to go. And can be resist the reality of the situation. I'll move on from there. So I'd like you all to stand up, please. I know, it's 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the afternoon. Come on. Oh, it's good exercise. Right, okay. Now, I'm going to ask you about professional development planning, okay? PDR, PDP, review with your supervisor, however you want to call it. And there's a little definition of it there, okay, for you to think about. Now, I would like you to sit down if you've never heard of professional development planning, right? If you haven't heard of it, you don't know what it is, please sit down. Okay? That's a few of you. Okay. The remaining of you probably, you know about professional development planning, but if you haven't really engaged in it or you're not doing it currently, could you sit down, please? Oh, well, look at that. Well, we've got 3 people standing. Are the members of staff, are you? Yeah. And how does your professional development planning appear for you? What goes on for your planning?
It's actually quite brief in my case because I'm probably quite happy where I am and have a good relationship with my line manager, so there's lots of opportunity to chat throughout the year. So our PDP is actually quite good.
Okay, a brief PDP. Anyone else like to contribute of the 3 standing? Are you quite happy with it?
Postgraduate studies supported by workplace.
There we are. Okay, thank you. Thanks. So that's quite interesting. And I'll tell you why that's quite interesting. Because by undertaking some kind of professional development planning, which you would do if, for example, you were a GP, a medical practitioner, right? Or you were an engineer, you would have professional practice and you would be looking at your professional development and reviewing it constantly. Why do researchers not do that? It's an interesting reflection on why you would not do it, because you are professionals and growing into being fantastically qualified, esteemed professionals. If you undertake PDP, it allows you to understand your strengths and weaknesses, to talk about your capabilities to employers, to other people and say, yeah, I can do this, I can evidence this, this is me. And I think one of the most important things is to make more informed choices that are for you. Okay, and lastly, be ready for opportunities. It was interesting about readiness for opportunities as in one of the presentations. Now, why should you bother about this? Well, there's your funder. Those of you who are on an MRC or a RC UK or a BBSRC funded doctoral program. Hands up. Funded? Yep, okay. That is a statement of expectations produced by the research councils. It has recommendations for your organisation, that's Imperial. It's got recommendations for your supervisors, and it's got recommendations for you. And I've put in bold there about responsibility for developing personal career goals, consider possible career options, Be aware of the range of advice available and reflect on their training and development. Now I know, because I know the research developers here, that there are a lot of opportunities for you here. Okay, so don't think it's going to be difficult to find them. That you're expected to develop high-level capabilities outlined in what they call the Researcher Development Statement, which is related to the Researcher Development Framework, which I'll come to in a minute. So I'll come back to that about sitting there thinking, what am I supposed to be doing here? Why am I doing this? Now, make no mistake, this is not just UK-centric. This is a European statement as well. Okay? Active engagement, individual career development plan, wouldn't that be a good thing to have by Christmas? Set yourself a target there. You know, meaningful engagement of researchers with other sectors. There's this internship program, there's extra funding, there are opportunities for that. Something you might think about doing now. Not later, think about it now, plan ahead. So I'm going to move on and say, right, okay, what's the structure? I talked about professional researchers. And we were asked to develop the Researcher Development Framework, which we did in consultation with successful researchers in the UK. And it has sort of steps to it. First of all, there's a literature survey. Then we moved on to look at empirical data, lots of interviews with successful and experienced researchers across all disciplines. Went into a great deal of consultation. At that time I was actually in Strathclyde, and we had a room like this full of researchers, our vice principals and so on, discussing whether or not this framework worked for us, and we reported that back. And then it went to the expert panels. And that became the Researcher Development Framework. Is this something that you're familiar with? Hands up if you're familiar with it, using it all the time. I've happened to carry my bag in case I meet researchers on the tube. That's the framework. I'm going to put it up on the screen, and you may find it difficult to see, so please pass those round. So here we go. Thinking about your skills. Now, I would bet 4 domains. Okay? Knowledge and intellectual abilities, personal effectiveness, research, governance and organisation, engagement, influence and impact. I bet, whatever stage you're at, you're thinking mainly in domain A. What do I need to get this research done? Okay, that's where that sits. Okay, but look at the other things that successful researchers in academia see as being important. It's quite a broad range. You won't get, for example, to be the independent researcher and the PI running research groups unless you're an expert in domain C as well. Ben was talking earlier on about his public engagement, his policy and so on, and he's working up in domain D. And personal effectiveness is very much about getting, working collaboratively. One of the presenters talked about collaboration, and that sits there as well. So if I kind of open it up, and it's the strangest circle I've seen in a long time. Looking at it, you will begin to see that it has the 4 domains, breaks out into subdomains, and then it goes out into descriptors. Wow. When we talk now about higher level skills of researchers, there you go. These are the skills that successful researchers declare are important to their success. And these are ones that you can develop. So it's not enough just to work in domain A. You need to think more broadly about your own personal capabilities development. Generally speaking, people have one of 2 reactions to this. I like the first one, which is, wow, is that me? Awesome. Oh, yeah, cool. The other one is, oh, flip. I've got so much else to do. What is this? How can I make sense of this? And I think you need kind of help to work through that. And I'm sure your researcher development teams will help you make sense of this for yourselves. So don't take it all in one. And I'll show you ways to kind of have a look at it as well. One of the things, and apologies, you won't be able to read this unless you've got super eyesight. Maybe you can. Behind each of those descriptors are phases for development. And the phases are from a beginning understanding to being the accomplished, internationally respected researcher. Okay, this one I've chosen is about integrity. Understands and demonstrates standards of good research practice in the institution and or discipline. Moves through the phases. I think phase 3 is quite interesting. acts as an exemplar and advises peers and less experienced members of staff, respecting their views and engaging effectively in discussion. This would be a good place for a supervisor to be, you know, in terms of supporting researchers. And then shapes policy and procedures of good practice in research in the HE sector. So you can see the gradation. Now, they're all different. Now, what happens when people map themselves around all these descriptors? You will find you're at level 3 in some areas, level 2 in some, 1, maybe 4, you know, depending on your background and your previous experience. So don't think that all 1 would apply to you. So that's worth having a look at, and that's on our website. This one, again on our website, is the Employability Lens. We've also got one called Getting Started in Research, another one on leadership, another one on enterprise, a whole range of them. And what they do is they draw out the particular skills and descriptors that are important, in this case, for employers. There's a core set of skills that we derived from surveys and questionnaires across Europe, actually, about what were the key skills that employers were looking for outside of academia from researchers. Now, these are ones that you're building during your research career. And if you gather evidence around them, when you're asked by a prospective employer if you have these capabilities, you would be able to evidence them. So it's kind of like just thinking out the box a bit. You know, I'm doing this in my research. How can I apply this elsewhere? That's the kind of thing. And as I keep talking about Ben's video, but back in that was very clear. Now, what we did on one of these kind of curiosity kind of things was to see, were there common, if you really want to know where to get started with the RDF, were there common kind of descriptors that sat around all these different perspectives or lenses? And there they are. You can see subject knowledge, critical thinking, problem solving, inquiring mind, self-confidence, and so on. All the way down. Collaboration's there, it was mentioned in one of the presentations. As an international researcher, you won't get far without being able to collaborate with others, and that means understanding the language of different disciplines and finding ways to work as a team. Team working's there as well, influence and leadership, something to aspire to in your research area. Having been funded by the MRC, you are clearly talented individuals. And the expectation is that some of you will go on to be research leaders of the future. So leadership is important in your development. I was interested in someone else being a co-investigator. One of the things we would say is that the researchers from a very early stage are developing leadership, whether it's leading your own research in your PhD, being a co-collaborator, being a PI, responsible for a work package, working on a European strand of a research exercise, collaborating. There are leadership skills all around that. And you should be thinking about how you're developing as leaders from now. I just put this slide in just to say, you know, one of the things about researchers, what does a researcher do? They research, produce evidence, data, whatever. But actually, one of the things that researchers find quite difficult to do is to produce evidence of their own capabilities. So please, if you do one thing, think about translating what you do into evidence of how you did it and how capable of what skills you displayed while you were doing that thing. You never know when that's going to come up handy, when you're talking to the next PI, the new employer, whatever. The opportunities are there. So I put this up, I called it a professional development opportunities, a quick checklist, because it's very easy to think that, do you know what, I'll go on a course, that'll be it. I'll go on a course and I'll be fine. But actually, if you broaden your horizons and thinking about your personal development, there are so many different opportunities for you to do it. Hands up, who's a mentor? That's good. 4 or 5 of you. Okay, one action might be find a mentor. It's not your supervisor, just a good friend that will help you through your journey. Find a role model. Who would you like to be like? Work towards that. Coaching, I don't know if there's coaching programs available. In Imperial, there are coaching programs available. Thought there might be. Work placements or internships, call them secondments. Mobility, I'll come to that in a minute about being mobile. It's very much seen that international research recognition is an important part of being a successful researcher. How does that work for you in your own circumstances? Researcher-led activities, if there's not something there, go and start something. Okay, when I was at Strathclyde and I was working with Vitae, I looked at what we call entrepreneurship. What I say is, if you unpack an academic, and I'm absolutely certain this would be asked Lucky right now, right? And I said, Lucky, right, so you're a research reader, yes? Yeah. And then I asked him, and I won't, but if I did, and what else do you do? What you would find is that an academic has many layers, and eventually, within those layers, there will be some drive, some initiative to make a difference, to innovate, to be creative, okay? Might be in research, but it might be starting up a company. It might be acquiring resources or a new lab. It might be getting funding. But these things are very entrepreneurial, and that's part of being a successful researcher. So starting yourselves up and say, right, okay, and on our website you will see some sort of case studies. These people say, well, actually, this was my research. There was no one else that knew anything about my research. So I started a discussion group. You know, I needed resources. I went to the university next door and I said, can I borrow your kit? And they said, yeah, okay. And, you know, that sort of thing. So see where you go. And that's where I get to enterprising. So all of those things are there, as well as the formal courses that will be provided for you. I'm just going to move on now to employment and careers beyond your doctoral research. Okay? What's interesting in our research is that, generally speaking, once a researcher, always a researcher. Okay? You never lose your research skills wherever you're working. Your problem solving, the way you approach things, is very much research orientated. It's quite special. So researchers 3 years after their doctoral training were talking about still being researchers in a variety of different careers. Okay? This one is interesting because what we find is that doctoral researchers don't go kind of into the same pattern of occupations as other graduates. So green is doctoral, blue is master's, and the sort of purpley colour is first degree. And you will see there's a variation. And this is something to note. So when you read things about employment, remember that researchers don't quite fit the standard pattern, all right? And that you should be looking in other places. Now, the interesting one for us is we can imagine HE research not in HE, so on and so on. But there's this group, other common doctoral occupations. Now, for you as a group, and you know, health professionals, large number looking in the health sector, and the other ones as well. So when you're looking at careers, be strategic in where you look. Your career services will help you with that. Now, this one, now I put an arrow at the biomedical sciences, but I realise that some of you will be from other disciplines as well. So you can find your biological sciences, biomedicals, purple, and the green is physical sciences and engineering. And you will see where slightly different patterns of the career destinations of doctoral graduates. Okay? It's interesting, biomedical sciences, other common doctoral occupations, 40%, that's your health sector, okay? Which is less so in the biological sciences. However, the biological sciences, more to pharma, go into research not in HE sector, all right? So there's sort of a range of career options for you. It's also interesting to note the number who stay in HE research. 23 to 27%. Okay, now this is the neck exercise. I can see you all going, yes, right, okay, can we see? The biomedical sciences are here, and really what this is illustrating is that we can break it down even further into the disciplinary areas within those broad sectors, okay? So if I read the biomedical sciences, there it goes: medicine, psychology, pharmacology, anatomy, physiology, pathology, nursing, other biomedical sciences. The rest, I know these slides are going online, so you can you can relax your necks now, right, for the next one, and you can see these online. These are all in our publications, by the way. Okay, so this one, it's a little bit easier, but this looks at employed overall in research careers. And again, you can see the pattern there is quite sort of disciplinary specific. So where you identify your research area, you may well then be able to assess more clearly your opportunities of progressing in research in that area. I wanted to just draw on thinking about mobility. The European Council have produced a very interesting report which identifies different kinds of mobility. International mobility, and the question there is, are you ready, willing and able for this? There are lots of reasons why, particularly in terms of equality and diversity, why people find mobility challenging. And it's something to be aware of and to work with your supervisor to see how that can be facilitated. Intersectoral, academia to industry, less vice versa, but there we are. Are you ready to work in that different business culture? Bit of internship, bit of experience would make all the difference to that. Fantastic opportunities working in industry for researchers. Interdisciplinary, that's across the research fields. Collaboration. Have you created opportunities to work with other researchers from other disciplines and you go, what are they talking about? When I was in Glasgow, it was the first time we worked, I was in computing science and we worked with biologists. I happened to have my first degree was in biology, and the language different, the communication differences between, and that was at the founding beginnings of kind of bioinformatics, but in those days it was really difficult to find that common ground. It takes a bit of working at. And then the one that's coming up, and this was at the ESOF conference, and I was quite struck by this one. It's about virtual mobility. To what extent are you using Web 2 technologies, big databases, to share, collaborate, and move internationally without leaving the room, really? And that's a very important thing to consider as well. I thought I'd just finish up with three kind of slides on. This is an OECD report. To give you a kind of landscape of where you are in terms of professional researcher careers. There's been a huge expansion in the number of doctorate wards. Europe wants, is it 1 million researchers by a particular date, so it's huge encouragement of people into research degrees. In international concept, the doctoral degree is, as we would all expect, to be the absolute fundamental for continuing in research. It's the qualifier. So you're well on your way to that by taking this programme. Note the next one, which is about the limited number of tenured position and less linear careers. The more researchers you have, the more competition you have for opportunity, and bear that in mind. The increased number of postdocs and temporary contracts is seen across Europe and across the world. So be aware that's a particular issue in the US at the moment, is that area there. So be aware of that. And the changes in the skill mix. You're developing your research competencies for a future that you don't know. Nobody knows. And so the constant demand for skills and expertise is changing all the time. And it's worth keeping up to speed with that as well. But here's the good news, right? Look at that, earnings premium. Nice, that probably doesn't feel like it. But there's tremendous potential, earnings potential. There's generally a sense that people with research degrees progress very quickly in their chosen career pathway, okay, because of the skills, the high-level skills that you will have developed. Higher education, academic careers are the main destination, but other knowledge-intensive sectors, and that's where you should think out the box. I was most taking the policy, government work, working in research-intensive companies, helping to start up a new company. There's lots of different ways that you can find a place in knowledge-intensive work. The earnings vary across countries. Contractual arrangements vary across countries. There's a tremendous drive to make it much more level playing field so that people have an easier step in terms of mobility. But it's still work in progress, I would say. The proportion of doctorates employed in research degrees varies across countries. So again, it's worth looking at the demographics there. And interestingly, although mobility is seen as important, this report suggests that researchers are less mobile than those who do other types of jobs, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? It's kind of contradictory in a sense. Doctor holders are pretty satisfied with their employment, but less so with their salaries and benefits. And there are issues about mobility and benefits and contracts and so on that are worth thinking about. High satisfaction levels, great employment rate. This has been very consistent over many years. Nice. But watch the ones about temporary contracts and permanent contracts. And if security of employment is important to you, then perhaps it may not come from HE, but may well come from somewhere else. So it's a trade-off of your career plan, of where you want to be, what risk you're prepared to take, how mobile you can be, what interests you, what makes you get up in the morning, you know, what is your passion. That's what you should follow. And then, see the permanent contracts lowest in HE. Which is interesting. So, final advice. It's a cycle. It's a loop, okay? If you leave this room and you get one thought, end of the day, oh, what am I going to do now? Just widen your horizons. Think about the research and development framework. Think about the skills and capabilities that you have, that you're developing. Have a conversation with your supervisor. Look at the development opportunities that are available in Imperial. And go through this process. Think about, put down here your vision, your ideas. Researchers are by definition ideas generators. So your strengths, your values in particular, that's where you go, and your preferences. Look at the landscape of opportunity, and I hope I've given you some idea today of the options. Think outside the box. Think of obstacles, think creatively, and use your research talents to break through them, both internal ones, external ones. It's the entrepreneurial in you all. Prepare for the unexpected, the opportunity and the change. And we had a lovely story about just unexpected conversations and that ability to seize on the moment and turn it into something great. And we call it happenstance. If you're open to opportunity and prepared for them, they will come. Take action now, please. You're all very talented people and deserve the best in your careers. Consider it as a journey, not that destination, and build that career basis as you go along. And then when you think you've done, review it and start all over again. Okay? So I'll close there and wish you every success. Thank you.